Cheers to the old man, Marcus shouted, hoisting a fragile crystal glass into the air. The yellowish glow of the living room lamp caught the sheen of sweat and euphoria on his face. Happy birthday, Pop! 70 years on this earth, and today isn't just a milestone. It's the first day of your new life. A life fit for a king. The pop of the cheap champagne cork echoed against the ceiling, striking the old plaster I had personally patched 30 years ago. The foam spilled over, running down Marcus's hand, my oldest son. He let out a loud, braying laugh, the kind that showed too much gum, the laugh he always had when he thought he was about to close a massive deal. I sat there at the head of the table, my hands clasped tightly over the tablecloth. My fingers were thick, calloused, and etched with tiny scars. The map of half a century spent as a mason, hauling bricks and mixing concrete in the Chicago wind. These were the hands of a laborer. These hands had built 4 walls to shield my family from the biting cold and the pouring rain. They had fed them every spoonful of warm grits when they were sick and wiped away their tears when they fell. But now those hands were shaking. It wasn't age, and it wasn't joy. It was a coldness that started at the base of my spine and seeped into my marrow, even though it was a sweltering July evening in the city. "Drink up, Pop," Brianna, my youngest, said as she pressed a glass to my lips. The heavy scent of her perfume hit me, sharp enough to cut through the lingering smell of dampness in the old house. She was smiling, but her eyes were restless, darting between the clock and the window like she was waiting for a train that was already behind schedule. "It's imported bubbly," she added. "We had to dip deep into our pockets for this bottle, because you deserve the best." I took the glass. The bubbling yellow liquid looked more like something you'd find in a hospital sample cup than a sweet nectar. "Thank you, children," I said, my voice sounding like a wagon wheel grinding over gravel. "But I'm an old soul. I'd rather have a sip of bourbon or a cold beer." "For heaven's sake, Pop," Marcus said, clicking his tongue and slamming the bottle onto the table. "Don't be so provincial. You're going to a 5-star estate. People there drink fine wine and eat French cheese. Nobody drinks that backwoods stuff." A 5-star estate. I looked around our family room. The photos had been stripped from the walls, leaving pale, rectangular ghosts where they used to hang. In the corner, behind the frayed sofa, I saw them. Cardboard boxes, dozens of them, sealed tight with heavy-duty packing tape. On one I recognized Brianna's hurried scrawl. "Pop's old junk. Toss or donate." It turned out the life of a king they were talking about began by packing my entire existence into trash boxes. I took a sip of the wine. It was bitter, bitter as it slid down my throat. You see, the intuition of an old wool never fails. When a devoted son suddenly appears after 10 years of neglect, bearing gifts and honeyed words, he's almost certainly hiding a knife behind his back, or a deed of sale in his pocket. On the cluttered table, surrounded by the remains of takeout ribs and empty bottles, sat a massive cake. It was ridiculously large for our narrow dining table. The thick white frosting was elaborately decorated to look like a magnificent building with rows of palm trees and a crystal blue pool. Red letters, written in strawberry syrup, arched across the top. "Safe travels, Pop. Welcome to the Gilded Haven." Brianna opened her laptop and swiveled the screen toward me. "Look at this, Pop." Her voice was high-pitched, like one of those birds that steals eggs from other nests. "This is the Gilded Haven, just 2 hours outside the city. Fresh air, no smog, no sirens. Look, your room is a luxury suite. It's got a flat-screen TV, an orthopedic mattress imported from Sweden, and 24-hour nursing staff. There's even a ballroom dance club for seniors on Saturdays. On the screen, silver-haired people in designer clothes were laughing over cocktails. They looked nothing like me. I looked down at my own clothes, a flannel shirt with a frayed collar, and slacks that were shiny at the knees from years of wear. "It looks real nice," I said, keeping my voice steady. "But it must be expensive, right, baby girl?" Marcus thrummed his chest, dropping crumbs onto the floor. "Quality costs, Pop. $5,000 a month. Brianna had to sell off some jewelry, and we had to pull some favors from friends just to cover the deposit on a 5-year platinum package for you, but it doesn't matter as long as you're taken care of. $5,000. The number bounced around my head. With that money, I could fix the leaking roof, buy RJ a brand new electric wheelchair, and live comfortably for a whole year. I turned my head toward the darkest corner of the room, where the light from the chandelier couldn't reach. There sat RJ, my youngest son. He was 35 years old, but his mind had been stalled at age 3 since that horrific motorcycle accident 10 years ago. His head slumped to one side, propped up by a dingy neck pillow. A thin trail of saliva ran from the corner of his mouth onto the bib I had put on him that afternoon. Nobody offered RJ a piece of cake. Nobody wiped his mouth. Marcus and Brianna didn't even look his way. To them, RJ didn't exist. He was just a piece of broken furniture they couldn't sell. "And what about RJ?" I asked, my eyes fixed on my youngest boy. "If I go off on this vacation, who's going to watch him? Who's going to turn him every 2 hours so his skin doesn't break out in sores? Who's going to blend his meals and feed him spoonful by spoonful?" The room went dead silent. The only sound was the rhythmic clicking of the ceiling fan. Marcus and Brianna exchanged a look I knew too well, the look of accomplices. "Oh, don't you worry about that, Pop," Brianna said, waving a hand dismissively. Her smile hardened. "We've got it all figured out. If you're going to rest, RJ needs professional care too." We contacted a state-run facility on the outskirts. They've got the equipment and the doctors. "A state facility?" I interrupted. "You mean that warehouse on the edge of town where they leave patients on the floor and the smell of bleach can't hide the stench of neglect?" "Don't say that, Pop," Marcus snapped, his face flushing. "That's the best place for his condition. He doesn't even know where he is. It doesn't matter to him. What matters is you. You sacrificed your whole life. It's time you lived for yourself. RJ, he's a burden. We can't take care of both of you at the same time." A burden. That word was a dagger, straight to my heart. I looked at RJ. His eyes were vacant. But at the sound of his brother shouting, he flinched. Somehow, his broken soul still felt the sting of his own blood's contempt. I balled my fists under the table, my nails digging into my palms. Damn them. They wanted to lock me in a luxury prison, to keep the neighbors from talking, then toss their brother into the trash to get rid of the problem. And all for what? For this house, a 3-story brownstone on a valuable lot that was appreciating every single day. "Eat some cake, Pop," Brianna said, cutting a huge slice. The part of the frosting with the image of the asylum was shredded under her knife. "It's too sweet," I said, looking at the plate. It wasn't sweet. It smelled like rot. The air in the room was so thick I could hardly breathe. The mix of champagne, cheap perfume, and hypocrisy created an invisible stench. "I need to use the restroom, I said, rising with difficulty. I feigned a limp, hunching my back, like a senile old man. I needed them to believe I was weak. An old wolf knows when to hide his teeth. Need help, Pop? Brianna asked, her seat firmly planted in her chair. I can manage. You all keep eating. I shuffled toward the hallway leading to the kitchen and the bathroom, but I didn't go inside. I pressed myself against the doorframe in the dark, where the light from the living room couldn't reach. I sharpened my ears. As soon as my back disappeared, the laughter died. God, Marcus hissed, his voice sounding like a snake spitting venom. Why is the old man so slow? He's driving me crazy. Keep it down, Brianna whispered. But he bought it. Did you see his eyes when he saw the cake? Old people love to be pampered. It was a breeze. I don't have time for breezy, Marcus muttered. I heard his impatient footsteps on the hardwood. Then a phone rang, an insistent, annoying ringtone. Hello? Marcus's voice changed completely. It was shaking, terrified, dropping to a frantic plea. Mr. Thorne? Yes, sir. I know. Today's the deadline. Please don't send anyone to the house. For God's sake, my mother's already gone. It's just the old man left. I held my breath, pressing against the wall. Thorne. That was a name he whispered in the pool, halls, and the back alleys. A high-stakes loan shark. The kind of man who gave you two options, pay up or disappear. I swear to you, Marcus continued, his voice cracking like he was about to cry. Tomorrow morning, just tomorrow. The old man is signing the papers tonight. I have the deed in my hand. Tomorrow I go to the bank to release the funds. It'll be in your account before lunch. No, please, don't cut my fingers off. I'm begging you. If I don't pay, you can come for me. Yes, I promise. The call ended. Then a thud. He must have kicked the table or thrown his phone. Did he threaten you? Brianna asked, her voice just as shaky. He said if he doesn't have the cash by tomorrow, he's putting me in a crate and dropping me in the river, Marcus panted. And you aren't safe either. That capital you borrowed for your spa? That was his money too. Then we have to move fast, Brianna hissed. As soon as he comes back to the table, you make him sign everything. Don't let him get stubborn about RJ. Once he signs, call the transport for the home. Have them take him tonight if possible. I stood frozen in the darkness. The blood in my veins felt like it had turned to ice. Lord have mercy. It wasn't that they cared about my hard work. It wasn't that they wanted me to rest. They were selling me. They were selling the father who raised them and the brother who shared their blood just to save their own miserable, cowardly lives. They had blown everything in parties and pretense, and now their only life jacket was this house, the sweat and tears of my entire life. I felt a sharp pain in my chest, as if someone had reached in to crush my old heart. The pain of betrayal was worse than death. But then, that pain shifted into something else, something colder, harder. I heard RJ moan in the living room. Maybe he was thirsty, or maybe he was scared. That weak sound snapped me out of my daze. If I signed those papers and went to that fake paradise, they would throw RJ into the streets. He would die slowly in some filthy corner, alone and in pain. No, not on my watch. I might be an uncultured laborer in their eyes, but I have never been a fool. I am Elias Vane, the man who survived the hardest winters and raised 3 kids with nothing but my bare hands. I took a deep breath, swallowed my tears, and straightened my collar. I wasn't going to unmask them yet. If I made a scene, the debt collectors would come and tear this house apart. Me, RJ, and them, we'd all go down together. I needed a different plan. A plan more ruthless, but more just. I stepped into the bathroom and flushed the toilet loudly to drown out my last sob. When I walked back out, I was no longer the father who loved blindly. I was the judge. I stood before the sink, leaning on the cold porcelain. The mirror was spotted with age, reflecting a face I hardly recognize. My skin was sagging, etched with deep furrows like dry earth. My hair was a thin, white halo. This was the Elias Vane of 70 years. I remembered my reflection from 30 years ago. Back then, my hair was jet black and thick as a horse's mane. My muscles were taut, carrying 2 bags of cement up to the 3rd floor without losing my breath. Back then, my wife Mary was still alive. Elias, I thought I heard her whisper in my ear. A soft voice smelling of cinnamon and fresh laundry. Promise me, old man, no matter what happens, to make sure the children don't want for anything. Don't let them suffer like we did. I kept my word, Mary, I whispered to my reflection. I worked like a beast from dawn to dusk. I didn't buy new clothes. I didn't go to the doctor when my back screamed, just so they could go to private schools and wear nice things. But maybe I was wrong. I spoiled them. I protected them so much they grew up without a backbone, only a bottomless greed. I had raised parasites in my own home. I looked at my hands again. Crooked fingers, thick nails stained black by the dust that was embedded so deep it could never be washed away. Marcus had the soft hands of an office worker, even though he'd been unemployed for 6 months. Brianna had long, brightly painted nails. Every time she got a manicure, she spent $100. They despised these hands. They were ashamed of my scent of sweat, but these hands and that sweat paid for the champagne they drank and the phones they held. Forgive me, Mary, I whispered, tears stinging my eyes. I failed to teach them how to be human, but I will not fail to protect RJ. I washed my face with cold water. The chill woke me up completely. I looked myself in the eye one last time. The dullness was gone, replaced by a sharp, cold, and firm gaze. The look of a man who has nothing left to lose. I pulled out an old handkerchief to dry my face. I adjusted my tie. I smiled. A smile I had never shown my children. The smile of a hunter laying a trap. All right, my dear children, I said quietly. You wanted to play happy family? I'll play with you until the very end. I opened the bathroom door, stepped into the hallway, and walked toward the false light of the living room. When I returned to the table, the atmosphere seemed less tense, or at least they were trying to pretend it was. Marcus was fidgeting with his empty glass. Brianna was checking her phone, but as soon as she saw me, she tucked it away. A stranger was now standing by the table. He wore a cheap suit that was a bit too tight around the gut. His hair was slicked back with too much gel, and he held a worn leather briefcase. He had the smile of a shark, the kind that eats carrion. Pop! Marcus jumped up with exaggerated joy. I'd like you to meet Mr. Sterling. He's a representative from the Gilded Haven. He came by personally, at this hour, to help us finish the registration paperwork for you. Hello, Mr. Vane. Sterling extended a hand that was sticky with sweat, shaking mine firmly. It's an honor. I've heard so much about you from your children. A great father. I guarantee you're going to love our facility. Hello, I replied, pulling my hand away quickly. Working this late must be exhausting. The client comes first, sir. He laughed loudly, then quickly snapped open his briefcase and pulled out a thick stack of documents. Time is money. I know you're anxious to get to your paradise, so I've got everything ready right here. He spread the papers across the table, pushing the cake aside. White sheets filled with dense, black legal clauses. It's very simple, sir, Sterling rattled on, pulling out a shiny pen. This is the long-term residency contract, 5-year platinum package. It includes the suite, meals, medical care, laundry, massages, and so on. The total value is, well, it's an impressive figure. But young Marcus here has already handled the deposit. Marcus nodded repeatedly, his eyes glued to the file. That's right, Pop. You just have to sign as the beneficiary of the service. The payment part is in my name, as the family representative. I took the file, feigning a squint. My reading glasses were old and scratched, but my mind was clearer than ever. I flipped through the pages, the numbers, the waivers, and then I stopped at the most important part. Page 1, Section A, Service Provider. The Gilded Haven. Page 2, Section B, Payer Guarantor. Marcus Vane and Elias Vane, co-owners of the mortgaged property. Page 3, Appendix A, Beneficiary Information Patient. The line for name of beneficiary was still blank. They didn't put the name here, I said, pointing to the empty line. Sterling rushed to explain. Oh, that's just a bit of flexibility, sir. Since you're the head of the household, sign the last page accepting the general terms first. We'll fill in the specific patient's name with a typewriter later, so it looks professional for your VIP membership card. The important thing is that signature in the Asset Commitment section. I looked at Marcus. His eyes were wide. He was holding his breath. He didn't care about the name on the card. He only cared about my signature on the mortgage section, so the contract would be valid, the proof he needed to give the loan shark that the house was as good as sold. Their greed and fear had made them sloppy. They wanted to do it fast. They thought I was a senile old man who would sign wherever he was told. There it was, the trap they set for me had a massive hole in it. And that same hole would be their grave. I see how it is. I nodded slowly. Technology these days, huh? So fast. Of course, Pop, Brianna urged, pressing the pen into my hand. Sign, Pop. Sign quickly, so we can cut the cake. RJ's getting hungry. She dared to use RJ as an excuse. The snake. I took the pen. The cold metal felt like a sliver of ice. I glanced at the blank Appendix A one more time. In the inner pocket of my jacket, pressed against my chest, was another paper, a detailed medical file for RJ that I always carried when I took him for checkups at the public hospital. It was the same size and paper stock as this appendix. A bold plan formed in my head. It was dangerous. It required the precision of a magician, but I had no other choice. All right, I said. My hand began to shake, this time on purpose. I'll sign, but goodness, my vision is blurry. Marcus, could you turn up the chandelier? Marcus muttered a curse under his breath, but stood up to go to the switch at the back of the room. Sterling also turned his head to look. Brianna was hunched over, sending messages. In that brief second when nobody was looking, my calloused hand moved like lightning. The heavy pen was in my hand. All eyes were soon fixed on the tip of the pen as it hovered over the line, like vultures waiting for a dying creature to take its last breath. But I hadn't touched the paper yet. There was something, a small stubborn residue of fatherly love, that still kicked in my chest. Even though I'd heard Marcus talk about his debts, even though I'd seen the contempt in Brianna's eyes, this foolish old heart was hoping for a way out, a narrow crack where they might repent. I looked directly into Brianna's eyes. She was tapping her red-painted nails on the oak table, impatient. Children, I said, my voice losing the sharpness of the wolf and returning to the weak tone of an aging father. Do I really have to go? Brianna frowned, deep lines of annoyance appearing on her forehead that even expensive Botox couldn't hide. Pop, don't start. We told you 1,000 times. This is for your own good. I'm scared, I said. And this time, I wasn't acting. The fear of loneliness was real. At this age, tearing an old tree up by its roots is a death sentence. Daughter, I don't need a suite. I don't need lobster or golf courses. Let me stay. I'll move into the storage room behind the kitchen. I'll eat less. I'll take care of myself and RJ, too. I promise not to get in the way of your business. I reached out and took Brianna's hand, which was weighed down by gold rings. Don't throw me out, baby girl. This is my home. A second of silence passed. For a brief moment, I saw her gaze flicker. Maybe somewhere deep, under the thick layers of makeup and vanity, there was a memory of the little girl who asked her daddy to carry her on his shoulders to see the fireworks. But then Marcus's voice cracked like a hammer. Give it a rest, Pop. He slammed the table, making the crystal glasses rattle. Don't pull this at the last minute. The deposit is paid. The contract is printed. Are you going to make us look bad in front of Mr. Sterling? Are you going to make us lose all that money? Brianna yanked her hand away, as if mine were a hot coal. The hesitation in her eyes died, replaced by the cruel coldness of a merchant. Marcus is right, Pop. Her voice hardened. If you stay in the storage room, what will people think? The neighbors will say we're ungrateful. Besides, we need to remodel this house into office spaces. There's no room for old or sick people. To make offices. I smiled bitterly. Or to hand it over to the sharks. Marcus's face changed color. Pale, then red with rage. What are you talking about, you senile old man? Just sign. Don't make me have to use force. He almost called me you, with a lack of respect he'd never dared before. The aggression was there. The last boundary of respect had been erased. I looked deep into the eyes of my 2 children for the last time. I saw no regret. I saw no love. I only saw greed burning bright, scorching whatever conscience they had left. They didn't need a father. They needed my signature to save their miserable lives. The fragile thread of affection inside me snapped. All right, I whispered, bowing my head to hide eyes that had turned sharp as razors. I understand. You've made your choice. The test was over, and they had failed miserably. I lowered the pen, pretending my hand was shaking so much I couldn't hold it. I needed a little more time to set the stage. My left hand instinctively reached into my coat pocket for my old phone. What time is it? I murmured. I want to call my old friend Silas to say goodbye before I leave. Immediately, a rough hand grabbed my wrist. It was Marcus. Faster than a blink, he snatched the old Nokia phone from my hand. You aren't calling anybody, he shouted, his eyes bulging. It's late. You're going to bother people at this hour? Besides, the doctor said you're in a sensitive stage. You get agitated easily. It's best to isolate you from the outside world. But it's my phone. I'll keep it for you. Marcus shoved the phone into his pocket and, while he was at it, grabbed the worn leather wallet I'd left on the table. I'll take the wallet and your ID too. Let me manage them for you. We don't want you losing them over there. I'll give them to the head nurse later. I looked at him, then at Sterling. Sterling just shrugged with a hypocritical smile, pretending not to see the blatant theft happening under his nose. Are you kidnapping me or what? I asked, feigning terror. Kidnapping. Pop, stop it, Brianna said, her voice sweet but threatening. It's protection. You're confused. If you go out, people will cheat at you. Now, focus on what's important. Mr. Sterling has been waiting. The air in the room suddenly felt dense, suffocating like a prison cell. The front door was locked, the windows shut tight. They had taken my means of communication, my money, my ID. I was surrounded by two ingrate children and a heartless broker. They thought this would scare me, make me obey. They thought I was a cornered old sheep. But they forgot one thing. When you corner even the gentlest animal, it knows how to bite. And I have never been gentle. I grew up on the streets, on construction sites filled with thieves and scams. This trick of isolating the victim, I'd seen it before Marcus was out of diapers. The fact that they took my phone and wallet actually strengthened my plan. They were too confident in their control. They thought they had me in the palm of their hand. That arrogance was their weak point. All right. I sighed deeply, letting my arms drop. Keep whatever you want. I'm just an old man in the way. I have no rights. Give me the pen. I'll sign to end this. Marcus sighed with relief, his shoulders relaxing. The victorious smile returned to his lips. He pushed the contract and the pen toward me once more. That's my man, he said. Quick and simple. Finish signing, and I'll pour you another glass. I took the pen, but this time I didn't look at the paper. I looked at the champagne bottle sitting right on the edge of the table, near where Sterling was sitting. The decisive moment had arrived. I held the pen with my right hand, pretending to lean heavily on the paper to get leverage. My left hand rested on the table, right next to the full glass of red wine Marcus had just poured. My eyes are failing me. I narrowed my eyes, bringing my face almost to the paper. These letters look like ants. Where is it? Which line? Mr. Sterling? Sterling leaned forward, pointing with a chubby finger to the bottom line. Right here, sir. Just above where it says head of household. Ah, I see, I murmured. And then I started to cough. A violent, racking cough that shook my thin chest. I doubled over. My whole body convulsed with every hack. And in that moment of chaos, my left elbow shot out, accidentally striking the champagne bottle and the glass of red wine. Crash! The bottle tipped. The crystal glass shattered. A cascade of dark red liquid splashed across the table, straight onto Sterling's white shirt and suit, soaking the papers spread out before him. Good God! Sterling shouted, jumping back from the chair and shaking his wine-soaked jacket. My new suit! Lord have mercy! Pop! Brianna shrieked. The hand-embroidered tablecloth. What on earth are you doing? Marcus rushed to grab a pile of napkins, trying to soak up the wine running across the table, cursing under his breath. The whole room was in chaos. Nobody was looking at me. They were all busy with the clothes and the mess. It was time. I was still doubled over, feigning a loud coughing fit, but my right hand slipped like lightning into the lapel of my jacket. My fingers touched the paper I had prepared, the Appendix A with the name Robert Vane printed in bold. My left hand, under the cover of the arm holding my chest as I coughed, slid over the messy table. I grabbed the blank Appendix A that had come loose next to the main contract. It was a little stained with wine on the edge, but that didn't matter. A sleight of hand move I had practiced 100 times in my head the night before. Snap! The blank white paper disappeared into my pocket. The paper with Robert's name appeared on the table, placed perfectly under the main contract in the same position, except I had smeared a little wine on its edge on purpose, so it looked like it had just been spilled on. The whole thing happened in less than 3 seconds. When Sterling looked up, his face red with anger, the magic trick was over. I was still sitting there, clutching my chest, gasping with a face full of guilt and fear. Oh, I'm so sorry, I stammered, my voice cracking. The cough. It just hit me. I'm so sorry. Did the papers get wet? Marcus picked up the file, shaking it. Some pages were soaked, stained red. "It's all wet. You useless old," he growled, looking at the stained papers. Sterling checked with a grimace of disgust. "Thank God the letters are still readable. It's just dirty. Printing it again would take too long, and I left the printer in the car down the block." He looked at his watch and then at his disheveled appearance. He wanted to finish fast so he could go change. "Whatever." He waved a hand. "It's still signable. The ink won't run. Sign quickly, please, sir. I need to go wash this shirt." I held my breath. Would he check the appendix below? He lifted the first page, the main contract. He saw it was only wet at the corner. He nodded. He didn't lift the page underneath. He pushed the damp, wine-smelling paper toward me. "Sign here." I smiled inwardly. His negligence and haste were my best allies. I took the pen again. The Bammel was now sticky with wine and broken glass, but nobody cared about cleaning it. Their only goal was the signature. I put the tip of the pen on the damp paper. The dark blue ink marked the wine-stained background, looking like a blood wound. I signed, Elias Vane. The strokes were shaky, but determined. I signed the payment commitment page, the authorization to dispose of the mortgaged assets, and most importantly, I signed confirming the file where the switched appendix sat underneath. "Done," I said, dropping the pen and leaning back in the chair, exhaling long as if a weight had been lifted. "My fate is in your hands." Marcus grabbed the paper immediately. He stared at my signature like it was a winning lottery ticket. His eyes gleamed. "Yes, that's it," he shouted, turning to high-five Brianna. "We did it!" Sterling quickly gathered the papers, shoving them all into his briefcase haphazardly, not bothering to neaten them. "Congratulations to the family. Deal's done. Transport arrives tomorrow at 7 a.m. Have the luggage ready." He left without saying goodbye, heading straight for the door, with the haste of someone who just closed a deal, but fears getting his hands any dirtier. The door slammed shut. In the living room, it was just me and my two children, in the full intoxication of victory. "Put on some music." Marcus laughed loudly, pouring the remaining wine into the last standing glass. "Tonight we drink until we drop. Tomorrow is freedom. Tomorrow we're rich." Brianna ran to hug her brother. Both were dancing, spinning in the middle of the room, even stepping on the broken glass. They laughed. A wild, shrill laugh. I sat in silence at the table, watching them celebrate over their own father's pain. They thought they had won. They thought they had plucked the old man clean. "Aren't you going to eat your cake, Pop?" Brianna asked, shouting in a mocking tone. "You can eat whatever you want now. Nobody's stopping you." "No," I said, rising slow and tired. "I'm exhausted. I want to go lie down for a bit with RJ. It's my last night at home." "Whatever." Marcus waved a hand, his eyes still glued to the copy of the contract he'd kept. "Don't bother us." I slipped silently out of the finished party, walking toward the dark corner where RJ was. The darkness swallowed me, separating me from the bright light and the noise of those demons. In my pocket, the crumpled blank appendix rested in silence. That was the proof of their crime, and the shield protecting my plan. Tomorrow. I just had to wait for tomorrow. The loud music and the laughter of Marcus and Brianna continued until 2 in the morning. Then snoring like thunder echoed from the living room sofa. They were passed out drunk right there, clutching the file like it was a pot of gold. The house fell into silence. A terrifying silence before the great storm. I didn't sleep. How could I sleep when blood was boiling in my veins? I sat by RJ's bed. The yellowish street light filtered through the crack in the window, illuminating my son's gaunt face. RJ slept with difficulty, a whistling sound in his breath. In 10 years, he'd never had a truly restful sleep. This mattress was flat. The springs poked into his back. In the summer, it was hot. In the winter, it was freezing. I gently stroked his tangled hair. It was sticky with sweat. "My son," I whispered, my voice breaking. Forgive me for letting you suffer all these years. I thought keeping you by my side was loving you, but I was only prolonging your pain." RJ moved, opening his eyes. They were clear, innocent, reflecting my aging silhouette. He couldn't speak, but I knew he recognized me. He made a small guttural sound. His contracted hand reached for mine. I took that cold hand and pressed it to my cheek. "Listen to me." I leaned it into his ear. "Tomorrow you're going on a long trip. You aren't going to some death trap facility. You're going to a beautiful place. There are gardens, air conditioning, and nurses who smell nice will bathe you and massage you every day. You'll eat well. You'll sleep on a soft mattress." RJ blinked. He seemed to be listening intently. "Your siblings, they don't need you, and they don't need me. But it doesn't matter. I have reclaimed justice for you. This house, my money, everything will be traded for your peace for the rest of your life." I pulled a carefully laminated old photo from my pocket. It was a photo of the whole family from 20 years ago when my wife was alive and RJ was a strong young man smiling on his new motorcycle. I tucked the photo into the pocket of RJ's pajamas. "Keep this so you remember you were loved, and you always will be." I kissed his forehead, a goodbye kiss, because I knew that after tomorrow I wouldn't have the chance to see him again. My plan would leave me with nothing. I would have to wander to survive. But I would rather starve on the streets than let RJ suffer one more day of torment. "Sleep, son." I patted his shoulder. "Sleep to gather strength. Tomorrow you'll be a king. And me, I'll be your sibling's nightmare." I stood up, went to the window, and looked at the black sky outside. On the horizon, a faint strip of light was beginning to appear. Dawn was coming. The hour of judgment had arrived. The sunlight filtered through the cracks in the dusty curtains, illuminating the pile of empty bottles rolling on the floor. The whole room stank of still alcohol and rancid food. A desolate scene after the victory binge of those who had just sold their own father. I had been up since 5. I was sitting in the old armchair, in the corner of the room, the only spot that hadn't been stained by last night's party. I had shaved, combed my sparse white hair with a little water, and put on the best suit of my life. It was a charcoal gray suit I'd had made 10 years ago for my wife's funeral. It was a bit large for my now thin body, but I had tightened the belt and straightened the tie. Next to my feet was a small worn leather suitcase. Inside was no clothing, only a few old photos, Mary's Bible, and my shaving kit. I took a sip of the black coffee that was already ice cold. The bitter taste numbed the tip of my tongue, but it helped me stay awake. I sat there like a statue, watching my 2 children sleep soundly on the sofa. Marcus had his mouth open, snoring as if he were sawing wood. Brianna was curled up with her makeup smeared, making her look like a sad clown. 7 o'clock sharp. Ding dong. The doorbell rang sharp, tearing through the morning silence. It wasn't the usual dull hum. It sounded crisp and decisive. Marcus stirred, muttering a curse and covering his eyes with his hand. Brianna also moaned, turning over, but unwilling to get up. Ding dong, ding dong. The bell repeated, patient but pressing. Open the door, Marcus mumbled, kicking his sister. Probably just the garbage truck. I stood up. The sound of my leather soles hitting the floor made Marcus snap one eye open. He saw me, impeccable, in my suit, standing imposing in the middle of the room like a ghost. "What the hell?" He rubbed his eyes, his voice raspy. "Why are you dressed like you're going to a wedding?" "The transport is here," I said curtly. "Get up. Don't keep the guests waiting." I walked to open the front door. A gust of fresh air entered the house. Parked right in front was not the dilapidated ambulance they had imagined. It was a pristine, white Mercedes Sprinter, gleaming and long. On the side, it had a Golden Crown logo and stylized lettering. Premium Medical Services, the Gilded Haven. 2 men stepped out of the vehicle. They didn't wear messy white lab coats. They wore custom-fit navy blue uniforms, polished black leather shoes, and communication headsets. They looked more like high-level bodyguards than nurses. Tall, built, with cold, professional faces. Marcus struggled to his feet, squinting at the door. Seeing the luxury vehicle, his eyes lit up. He nudged Brianna. "Get up! Look at that! The Mercedes came for the old man. Wow, quality really does cost. That's fancier than the president's ride." He staggered as he rose, hurriedly smoothing his hair and pulling up his sagging shorts. He wanted to look like the owner of that expensive contract. "Morning." Marcus walked to the door with a jovial voice, mixed with a bit of fawning. Very punctual. "I'm Marcus Vane, the one who paid for the package yesterday." The nurse in the lead, with the name Ramirez embroidered on his chest, gave a slight nod of courtesy, but didn't smile. He held an electronic tablet in his hand. "Good morning, sir. We are here to execute the transfer order under contract number 09882. Priority code Platinum." Exactly. Marcus laughed happily, turning to point at me. "Here's the cargo. I mean the passenger. The old man's ready. There's his suitcase. You guys carrying him? Or is he walking?" I remained motionless, gripping the handle of my suitcase tight. I looked directly at Ramirez without saying a word. Ramirez scanned me from head to toe. Then he looked at his tablet, his eyebrows furrowing slightly. "Excuse me." Ramirez's voice was deep and resonant. "There's a confusion here." The smile on Marcus's lips froze. "Confusion? What confusion? I already made the full transfer. Don't tell me you hiked the price at the last minute." Brianna had woken up too, stumbling over to stand behind her brother, watching with concern. "What's wrong? You aren't taking him?" Ramirez didn't answer immediately. He slid his finger across the tablet screen and then pulled a printed sheet from his clipboard. "Mr. Elias Vane?" Ramirez asked, looking toward me. "That's me," I replied calmly. "You are the one who signed as the guarantor of payment, correct?" "Exactly," Marcus interjected, his voice starting to sound annoyed. "Look, my dad pays and my dad goes. The contract says it clearly." Ramirez shook his head, a flat denial that fell like a stone on my children's chests. "No, sir. According to the attached medical file and the beneficiary appendix signed and confirmed last night, the patient we are to collect is not Mr. Elias." He held the sheet high. The morning sun clearly illuminated the bold black letters on the white paper. Transfer order for patient Robert Vane, RJ. Condition: quadriplegia, muscle atrophy, incontinence. Requirement: intensive care, 24/7. In the room, the space seemed to freeze. The birds singing in the yard suddenly sounded strangely shrill. Marcus stood there agape, his eyes bulging as if they were about to pop out of their sockets. He looked at the paper, then at me, then back at the paper. His alcohol-soaked brain couldn't process this information. What? What in the hell? He stammered out. It's a joke. Robert is my brother, the invalid. The one going to the home is this old man. He's healthy. He can walk. I don't know what agreement you have, Ramirez said coldly, with the tone of someone who just follows the rules. But the legal documents are clear. Mr. Elias's signature here confirms that Robert is the sole beneficiary of this life care package. We cannot admit a healthy person into the intensive care unit. Brianna shrieked, lunging to snatch the paper from Ramirez. Let me see. That's absurd. Yesterday, clearly. Her eyes scanned the paper. The blood drained from her face. The signature. It is Pop's signature, she whispered, her hands trembling. But where did this sheet come from? Yesterday when we signed, she looked up at me, and in that moment, she understood everything. I was standing there, as impassive as a stone statue. Slowly, I took off my glasses, revealing sharp, cold eyes that looked straight into her dark heart. Hello, children, I said in a soft voice, dripping with absolute sarcasm. I remember you said yesterday that you wanted the best for the family, right? RJ needs doctors more than I do. He needs air conditioning and a soft mattress more than I do. So I gave that spot to your brother. You, Marcus choked, his face turning red with rage. He pointed a trembling finger at me. You cheated us. You switched the papers. Watch your mouth, I interrupted him. I just filled in the blank space you so generously left. You were too busy worrying about getting the signature to sell the house that you forgot to read who you were enrolling. The truth hit Marcus and Brianna like a sledgehammer. Marcus grabbed his head, stumbling back. No. Impossible. $5,000 a month. $60,000 a year. That money is the price of my life. You dared to use it on that useless. He roared, lunging frantically toward me. The violent instinct of a cornered man woke up. He wanted to hit me, to tear me apart to get that money back. But before he could touch my lapel, a massive hand blocked his chest. It was the second nurse. He'd been silent by the vehicle, but his reflexes were lightning fast. He only needed a gentle shove with one hand to make Marcus stagger and fall flat on his face. Maintain your distance, the nurse said in a grave, threatening voice. We have orders to protect the safety of family and clients during the transfer. Brianna stood paralyzed. Tears began to flow, smearing her already miserable face. She wasn't crying out of pity for me or joy for RJ. She was crying for the money. Pop, she moaned, falling to her knees. You're killing us with this. The contract is non-refundable. You know that. If RJ goes, what are we going to live on? If you went, we'd have our hands free to do business, to sell the house. To sell the house, I smiled with contempt. You're still thinking about selling the house while your brother is about to be saved from this hell. Let him rot. Marcus scrambled up, his eyes bloodshot. He's junk. It doesn't matter if he dies, but my money. He turned to Ramirez, grabbing his shirt, pleading like a coward. Listen, cancel the contract. Help me. I'll give you a cut. We'll go halves. Say there was a mistake. Don't take the invalid. Take this old man. Or take nobody. Just give me the money back. Ramirez brushed his hand away with disgust, smoothing his shirt where he'd been touched. Sir, this is a legal contract with electronic certification. At the moment of signing, the money is already in the corporate system. Immediate cancellation carries 100% penalty. And I repeat, we work under the law. Where is the patient, Robert Vane? We need to take him immediately to comply with the morning treatment. Marcus collapsed completely, leaning against the wall and sliding to the floor, pulling at his hair with both hands. His mouth babbled senseless words. The shadow, the sharks, cut off hands, concrete. He knew he was finished. He had used money from a high-interest loan to pay for the home, hoping to sell the house and pay it back with a huge profit. But now the money was gone. The house hadn't been sold, and it never would be the way he thought. And the burden he wanted to discard was going to enjoy luxury services paid for with his own blood money. It was an irony, so bitter it was lethal. I looked at my two children writhing in the filth of the greed they had created. My heart didn't feel a single ounce of compassion. Compassion died last night when they snatched my phone. "Go get the patient," I said to Ramirez, pointing inside. "He's in the corner of the room. Be gentle. In 10 years, nobody has carried him with care." Ramirez signaled his colleague. They pulled a modern gurney from the back of the vehicle, complete with an air mattress and velvet-lined safety straps. They wheeled the gurney into the house. The wheels glided smoothly over the broken tiles. As they approached RJ, Marcus suddenly jumped up. Desperation had turned him into a mad beast. "Don't take him," he shouted, blocking the gurney. "He's property. He's my family. I am the head of the house. I forbid you to take him. If he goes, I'm calling the cops for kidnapping." Ramirez stopped, sighing with a look of annoyance, like he had to deal with a spoiled child. He pulled a hard ID card and a radio from his pocket. "Sir," Ramirez said, hardening his voice, each word hard like a hammer blow. "First, the legal guardian of Robert, according to the most recent documents, is our facility. Mr. Elias, here present, signed the transfer of medical custody. Second," he took another step toward Marcus, using his superior height to intimidate. "Obstructing medical personnel during the transfer of a critical patient is a federal offense. The penalty is 3 to 5 years in prison. Do you want me to call the police to file the report right now?" The word police was a bucket of ice water to Marcus's face. Brianna rushed forward, pulling hard on her brother's sleeve. "No, don't call the police," she hissed into Marcus's ear. "Are you crazy? If the police come, they'll check the papers. They'll see your debts. And the shadow will know there are problems here. Those people hate when the law gets involved. Do you want to die sooner?" Marcus shuddered. He looked at the navy blue uniforms, the shiny badges on their chests, and then looked toward the street. The fear of the loan sharks was greater than the fear of losing the money. If the police arrived, everything would come to light, and he would be hunted by both sides, the law and the mob. He gritted his teeth, his jaw tensed, but his legs stepped back automatically. He surrendered. "Fine," he hissed through his teeth. "Take him. Take that thing so I never see it again." Ramirez gave a slight nod, not deigning to look at Marcus ever again. He approached RJ. I watched the scene. Two strange, large men leaning over my paralyzed son. They didn't grimace at his smell. They weren't rough. "Good morning, friend," Ramirez said softly to RJ. "We've come to take you for a ride." They lifted RJ with delicacy. Their movements were so expert and smooth that RJ didn't even flinch. They placed him on the air mattress. For the first time, I saw RJ's contracted body stretch out comfortably. They covered him with a pristine white wool blanket, hiding his old, dirty clothes. RJ opened his eyes wide, looking at the ceiling and then at me. I approached the gurney. The pleasant scent of antiseptic emanated from the blanket, overpowering the damp smell of the house. Marcus and Brianna stayed huddled in the corner, looking away. They didn't dare face the truth, that the burden they despised was now being treated like royalty, while they were on the edge of the abyss. I took RJ's thin hand peeking out from the blanket. It felt warm. "Go, son," I said, trying to keep my voice from trembling. I didn't say a final goodbye because I didn't want those two to suspect my own escape plan. Be good over there. Daddy will take care of everything here at the house. RJ couldn't speak, but his eyes lit up with a strange look, a look of peace. He knew he had escaped. He would no longer have to hear his siblings' insults. He would no longer be hungry or thirsty in the dark. Ramirez buckled RJ's safety belt and nodded to me. We're leaving, Mr. Vane. The head doctor will call you to update you on the situation every Friday night. Thank you, I replied. Take care of him, like he was your own family. It's our job, sir. They pushed the gurney toward the door. The bright morning light flooded in, enveloping RJ like a halo. The white Mercedes was waiting with its rear doors wide open, like the gates of heaven. I stood in the threshold, watching as they loaded RJ into the vehicle. The door closed with a firm, soft clack. The engine started silently. The vehicle moved, gliding smoothly over the pothole-filled street, carrying my poor son toward a new life. I watched until the car disappeared around the corner. A tear rolled down my hot cheek. It was the only tear of happiness in the last 10 years. I had done it. I had saved him. But when I turned around, facing the empty house and the two demons about to explode behind me, I knew the hardest part of this play was just beginning. The storm had passed for RJ, but it was spinning straight for my head. Marcus was standing in the middle of the living room with clenched fists, eyes full of a murderous gaze. Brianna was rummaging through her purse, maybe looking for tranquilizers or to call for help. Old man, Marcus growled, walking step by step toward me, his foul breath hitting my face. The invalid is gone. The contract is closed. The money is lost. But I still have this house. Give me the deed and the power of attorney to sell it, right now. I adjusted my suit collar, looking him directly in the face. It was time for the final blow. The deed? I asked, in a voice so calm it was chilling. I thought I told you already, didn't I? Ah, the deed, I repeated, my deep voice echoing in the middle of the room, filled with the wreckage of a broken family. You want to sell the house? Don't play dumb, old man, Marcus roared, lunging to grab me by my lapels. His breath, stinking of old alcohol and fear, hit my face. Give me the papers right now. If I have the deed, I can still go to the bank to mortgage it. I still have a chance to move before lunch. Give them to me. He searched roughly, in the inner pocket of my jacket, where I'd just pulled the appendix from, but his hand only touched another very thin stack of papers. I didn't resist. I stood still as an old oak in the middle of a storm, letting my crazed son manhandle me. When he pulled those papers out, his eyes shone with a frantic hope. Here they are! Here they are! He shouted, opening the file with trembling hands. Brianna also pounced, peering over his shoulder. Her makeup-stained face showed obvious greed, but the smile on her lips died in just 3 seconds. What the hell is this? Marcus stammered, flipping the pages over and over. Certified copy. Trust agreement. Why? Why's the bank's name here? I brushed his hand off me, slowly adjusting my collar with dignity. Irrevocable trust, I said, emphasizing every syllable. You thought because I was old, I was senile. You thought I knew nothing of the law, because I just listened to the radio. I walked to the table and poured myself a glass of water. My throat was dry after this long performance. A month ago, I began, in a calm voice, as if telling a story to a grandchild. Right after the day I heard you planning to put me in the home, I went to see the notary. I transferred the ownership of this house to a trust. A trust? Brianna asked, her voice lost. What does that mean? It means, I turned to look at them with a sharp gaze, that legally, This house is no longer my personal property. It has been transferred to the bank for management with a single purpose: to guarantee the lifelong maintenance expenses of the beneficiary, Robert Vane. Marcus froze. The paper slipped from his hand, fluttering down to the dusty floor. "You're lying," he moaned. "But you just signed the mortgage with the home. That paper from earlier." "The paper from earlier," I interrupted, "was just an authorization letter for the home to collect from the trust monthly. It wasn't a sale of the house, and most importantly," I stepped closer to Marcus, looking straight into eyes dilated with terror. "The trust clause states clearly, this property is totally frozen. Nobody can sell, transfer, or mortgage it in any form as long as Robert lives. And if anyone tries to invade or fails to pay for maintenance, the bank will immediately seize the house to auction it and use the money to care for Robert." The whole room fell into a deathly silence. Only the sound of the ceiling fan, clicking over our heads, sounded like the mocking laughter of fate. The trap had closed. It wasn't a steel trap, but a trap of paper, law, and meticulous calculation. I used their own greed to bind their hands. Marcus fell to his knees on the floor, clutching his head with both hands, messing up his greasy hair. He no longer looked like an arrogant 30-year-old man, but like a spoiled child who had just broken the most valuable vase in the house. "It can't be. It can't be," he muttered over and over. "The house isn't for sale. There's no money. Then I'm dead. The shadow is going to kill me. He's going to skin me alive." Brianna shrieked, lunging to scratch at me. "Why did you do this? Why are you so cruel? You'd rather give the house to the bank than save your own children?" I caught her wrist. My mason's hand squeezed hard, making her scream in pain. "Save you?" I growled. "How many times have I saved you, Brianna? I paid the debts of your failing spa. I sold the land in the country so Marcus could pay his gambling debts 3 years ago. And how do you pay me? With a fake party and a one-way ticket to the morgue?" I released her hand suddenly. She fell flat on the sofa. "This house," I pointed around at the damp-stained walls, "is the sweat and tear of your parents' entire lives. Your mother, before she died, said, 'Leave the kids the fishing rod. Don't give them the fish.' I was wrong to give you too much rotten fish. Now, I'm using this fishing rod to catch a life for Robert." "But Robert's already gone," Marcus wailed, his face covered in snot and tears. "He's living like a king. And what about us? You're pushing us to our deaths." "That was your choice," I replied coldly. "This morning, if you had accepted me staying in the storage room, if you had shown even a little bit of humanity, I would have torn up that trust agreement. I gave you one last chance, but you chose the money. So now learn to live without it." Brianna was crying at the top of her lungs, like a child, but her weeping didn't move me. I knew she was crying for fear of poverty, not out of regret. "Pop," she sobbed, "the collectors are horrible. They're going to come here. They won't forgive to us. Cancel that trust." "You created it. You can go to the bank and cancel it. Irrevocable trust," I repeated. "It cannot be canceled. Even if I wanted to, the law doesn't allow it. Now the bank is the owner. Robert is the beneficiary. I and you are just hangers-on." That was my only lie of the morning. In reality, there were still complex legal ways to intervene if I really wanted to, but I didn't. I needed them to believe the door was closed forever. I needed them to face their consequences with no way out. Then we're going to die, Marcus moaned, lying on the floor, staring blankly at the ceiling like a soulless corpse. Just at that moment, a sound came from the street. It wasn't birds. It wasn't a bus. It was the low growl of a large SUV engine, the sound of tires crunching on the gravel in front of the gate, and then the sound of doors slamming. Thud, thud, with force. The air in the room froze. Intangible fear seeped through every pore. Marcus jumped like a spring, his face white as paper. He ran to the window, pulled the curtain back an inch, and immediately let go of the fabric, as if it had given him an electric shock. It's them. His voice was just a breathless whisper. A black Suburban. 3 guys. It's the Carver, the gang's enforcer. Brianna covered her mouth to keep from screaming, her eyes bulging with terror. Both huddled together in a corner, trembling like rats hearing the meow of a cat. Pop, close the door. Pop, call the cops, Brianna whispered, digging her nails into her brother's arm. Too late, I said, staying still in the middle of the room. If we call the cops now, we all die. The Shadow doesn't like the law getting into his business. Heavy footsteps sounded in the yard. Clack, clack, clack. The sound of military boots hitting the ground. Then a pounding on the door. Thud, thud, thud. The old wooden door vibrated, shedding dust. Marcus! Our raspy, crude voice boomed from outside, on a voice that carried the sound of the streets, of violence and blood. Open the door, you dog! I know you're in there. Your car's outside. Marcus knelt, joining his hands in a plea toward me. Pop, go out and talk to them. Tell them the money is coming. Tell them to give me a few more days. You're an old man. They respect the elderly. Pop! I looked at my cowardly son. He was willing to sell me to a home, and now he wanted to use me as a human shield to take the bullets for him. I didn't borrow money from them, I said clearly. I didn't spend a cent of that money. Why do I have to go out? Because you're my father, he shouted desperately, tears streaming down. Don't you remember? I leaned on me down to look at him. A little while ago, you said I was a burden. You said I was senile. Now, this burden can't handle your problems. Thud. The kick at the door was stronger, followed by a metallic sound. They were forcing the lock. Listen, I said quickly, my voice firm. There's a back door in this house that leads to the alley. I haven't locked that door yet. If you run now, maybe you'll make it. Marcus's eyes lit up. The survival instinct woke up. Run! Yes, run! He scrambled up, pulling Brianna. Let's go, fast! But where? We don't have any money, Brianna wailed, stumbling. Anywhere is better than waiting for death here. Marcus hurriedly grabbed the wallet from the table. My empty wallet he'd stolen earlier. He forgot it had no cash and dragged his sister, running desperately toward the kitchen. They didn't turn back to look at me once. Not an apology, not a goodbye. Only cowardice and fear enveloped them. I heard the back door open and then the sound of footsteps running, fading away down the alley. It was over. They were gone. The house now only had me and the uninvited guests breaking the door outside. I straightened my tie one last time, picked up my small suitcase, and put on my felt hat to cover my white hair. The front door burst open. Boom! 3 built men entered. They were tattooed, wearing black tank tops, with unfriendly faces. The one in the lead, the Carver, had a long scar running from his eye to his chin. He held a metal baseball bat. He looked around the empty room, and then his gaze stopped on me, an old man, well-dressed, standing calmly in the middle of the mess. "Where is he?" he growled. I didn't flinch. Years of working on sites, facing accidents and crooked contractors, had forged a steel temper in me that my children would never have. "He's gone," I replied, with a strange calm. "He ran out the back. He's probably at the main road by now." The guy with the bat frowned, looking surprised by my attitude. He stepped closer, raising the bat threateningly. "Who are you?" "His father. He owes my boss $300,000. If he ran, then you pay." I looked him straight in the eye, the dull eyes of an old man versus the fierce eyes of a killer. "Do I look like someone who has $300,000? I asked, pointing to the old, broken furniture around us. "I'm the person he just cheated into selling all his properties. You're a step too late. This house belongs to the bank now, and the cash, he spent it all on gambling." The thug looked around, saw the discarded boxes, the smashed cake on the table, and the air of desolation of a newly collapsed family. He spat on the floor. "Damn it!" he cursed. "That dog runs fast." He turned to his goons. "You two, follow him out the back. He hasn't gone far. Bring him back by his neck." The two goons nodded and ran past me toward the kitchen. The leader turned to look at me, scrutinizing me. "And the old man? Where are you going?" "I'm going to find work," I replied, lifting the small suitcase. "I have nothing. Now I have to look for what to eat day to day, just like you." He looked at me for a long time and then lowered the bat. Maybe he saw something respectable in me. Or maybe he just knew you can't get blood from a dry stone. In the underworld, sometimes an unwritten rule is kept. Don't touch the elderly or women if it's not necessary, especially those who have nothing left to lose. "Get out!" He jerked his chin toward the door. "Get out of my sight before I change my mind. If I catch your son, I'll send you a finger as a souvenir." "Don't send it to me," I said, walking past him. "Send it to the asylum. His brother is the only heir to the Vane name." I walked out the door. The bright midday sun hit my face. I took a deep breath. The air smelled of dust and gasoline, but to me, it was the scent of freedom. I didn't turn back to look at the house. I heard the sound of things breaking inside, shattering glass, the enforcers' shouts. They were venting their rage against the inert walls. That house, which held so many happy and sad memories, had now become the tomb of the past. I left it to the past. I walked down the familiar street. Neighbors looked at me with curiosity. The woman selling breakfast on the corner waved. "Goodbye, Mr. Vane. Going on a trip? You look so handsome." I smiled, tipping my hat. "Yes, I'm going on a long trip, Mrs. Gable. A very long trip." I didn't take a cab. I walked to the bus stop on the main avenue. Each of my steps was firm. I felt light, without the burden of worrying about spoiled children, without the constant fear that RJ would be abandoned. I had fulfilled my mission as a father in the cruelest, most painful way, but also the most necessary. The central station was loud and chaotic, as always. The sound of speakers announcing trips, people hawking tickets, children crying. I stood in line at the economy counter. No plane tickets to Italy or France, as I had once lied. I didn't have money for those luxuries, and, honestly, I didn't want to go. "One ticket to Detroit," I said to the clerk through the thick glass. Detroit, the industrial city to the north, far away, dusty but always lacking labor. They say, if you have health and a will to work, You never starve there. One way or round trip, sir? One way, I replied curtly. I don't plan on coming back. With the ticket in hand, I found an empty spot on a hard plastic waiting bench. I opened my small suitcase and pulled out the ham sandwich I had hidden since last night. It was a bit dry, but I ate it with relish. As I chewed, I watched the flow of people passing by. I wondered where Marcus and Brianna would be at this hour. Maybe hiding in some cheap motel, trembling every time they heard a siren. Or maybe they'd already been caught. Whatever happened, that was their life now. They were adults. They had hands, feet, and a very expensive lesson I had just taught them. If they survive this disaster, maybe they'll learn to be decent people. And if not, well, that is destiny. Que sera, sera. I pulled out a phone. Not the old Nokia Marcus stole. That one had been out of battery for a long time. It was a cheap smartphone I had bought in secret. I opened the gallery. A photo of RJ smiling in the Mercedes appeared. He looked so at peace. I sent a message to Ramirez's number, the head nurse. Thank you, son. Take care of him. The money will transfer automatically on the 5th of every month. Don't let anyone bother him. Then I took out the SIM card, snapped it in two, and tossed it in the trash can next to me. Bus to Detroit. Departing from Gate 8, the speaker blared. I stood up, taking my suitcase. My back was still straight. My steps were still firm. At 70, people usually think about resting. They think about death. But I am different. I am starting a new life. I'll wash dishes. I'll sweep floors. I'll work as a night watchman. I'll do whatever it takes to live with these hands. Calloused hands that never knew how to betray. I boarded the bus, choosing a seat by the window. The vehicle started, pulling out of the terminal and plunging into the heavy traffic. The skyline faded through the dusty window of the road. The tall buildings, the slums, and the house I once called home, everything vanished. I closed my eyes, leaning my head back against the seat. For the first time in 10 years, I slept deeply, without nightmares. They say blood is the most sacred thing, but today I realized a more bitter, naked truth. Blood makes you related, but only loyalty makes you family. And my family now is just me and my son, lying in a 5-star bed hundreds of miles from here. Those other two, they were just strangers who shared the road for a little while. The bus accelerated, heading north toward the horizon, where the dark clouds were breaking, to make way for an intense, brilliant sun. I'm really glad you're here, and that I could share my story with you. If you liked it, show me by liking the video and subscribing to my channel. Let's see how many of us there are. Write in the comments which city you're watching from and what time it is. I'm so curious to know where all you wonderful people are tuning in from. If you want to support me a little extra, you can also send a small donation. I share new life stories for you every single day. And now, 2 of my most popular stories will pop up on the screen so you can choose what to watch next.